Well, welcome back to the Cyber Talent Matrix. I'm Jeff Welgan, joined by my co-host Sasha Vanterpool and Will Denman. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Katrina Rosseini, Chairwoman of the Board for the Civilian Reserve Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or CR-ISAC. The CR-ISAC is helping our nation prepare for a more dynamic and uncertain future. Founded to organize and mobilize cyber, IT, and analyst volunteers, its mission is to build the capability to surge skilled defenders when the nation needs it most. A powerful example of how collaboration, readiness, and purpose can strengthen cyber resilience long before crisis strikes. And as recently, skillrex has proudly joined that mission as CR-ISAC's strategic talent intelligence partner, helping turn workforce data into actionable insight at the human layer of defense. So today, we're exploring how threats, talent, and intelligence come together to build a more secure and resilient U.S. cyber ecosystem. So thanks for hanging out with us today, Katrina.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And welcome back, Sasha and Will. Always good to have you back. I know
Yes.
Will's being a little quiet today. He doesn't feel as good, which is unfortunate because, Katrina's background in AI and post-quantum, I think there'd be a lot of really great conversations Will would have with you. So let's start off kind of big picture. Katrina, tell us a little bit about CR-ISAC, what the mission is, what the purpose is, how did it get started?
So, you covered a good concept of it, and ultimately, in simple terms, it was really formed to bridge a national gap. So, the lack of an organized civilian-driven forces that can actually support the state and federal cyber defense when critical infrastructure, when our most essential entities, water, power, hospitals are under attack and under pressure. Who do we turn to? So the idea really came from a simple realization that when cyber crisis hits, we can't just build those capabilities in that moment, as we know. And Major General Vic Macias, who's the founder of CR-ISAC, founded it roughly about a year ago, had met with the Ukrainians to understand what the best practices were, the discussions there in order to get our country, our nation prepared and cyber resilient. Well, that ended up leading to establishing a reserve. So by organizing before an emergency happens, building readiness before actually having to react. That's the position we want to be in. So CR-ISAC is really designed to do exactly that, to build a reserve of vetted and skilled OT civilians who can be mobilized when and not if, I always say, the need arises to defend our nation. This is not just national security, is also economic stability from a global perspective when it's actually put into perspective. So that's the premise of it and why we formed. And 1 year in, we have partnered with various entities, and we're really excited to be here, including with skillrex, as you mentioned.
Can you walk us through a little bit of the timeline of where you started when it got founded, and then kind of what's next here for CR-ISAC? What's the next phase of the organization?
So the organization itself was founded by Major General Vic Macias roughly a year ago, and we have a board we've established with very credible folks who are extremely passionate about this mission. Defending America is a mission for all of us. It's not just our mission; it's actually what we're doing. As far as my involvement goes, I joined the board a few months ago, and I became chair of the Civilian Reserve shortly thereafter. And ever since, we held a stakeholder meeting. And what I think is really interesting and important to point out is most people might not be aware of this if you're not within the cybersecurity circles, but there was an executive order not that long ago that was pushed down from the Trump administration mandating that states take on cybersecurity for their own critical infrastructure. Now, my perspective from a concept of states taking on that should be an element that states should be prepared for, of course. But what does that mean? Every state's different. Resources already are lacking. We don't have that much time to really truly prepare. We need to be prepared yesterday. So the idea of having a reserve of these vetted and skilled people makes so much sense across the nation. So we decided to partner with stakeholders in Florida, specifically focusing on Tampa region, so that we can build this roadmap so that states can collaborate and partner with us along with our partnerships that we have already in place from ICS Village, their partnership with us on the training modules, to skillrex with the work you guys are doing as far as the data analytics side of this, that is going to be extremely instrumental, to entities like the State Guard, which, as you know, we're going to be on panels this coming week, Jeff, in Tampa, Florida. State Guard's having their annual conference to cover a lot of these topics. And I highly recommend those who want to attend and or can attend to do so, because we're going to have a lot of our strategic partners there. And we'd love to obviously hear from others, because we're just starting and we want to hit the road running and do it right, do it effectively, so we can take this concept, this roadmap we're building for the state of Florida, and have other states adopt it throughout the nation. Because at the end of the day, if the states are required, which we're saying they are, we want every state to be prepared. And the information sharing element is obviously, even though it's the byproduct, has been actually the driver of why Major Mossi has established it. Because at the end of the day, we know that information is king, and information is going to be extremely vital when, not if, something of this caliber were to occur in our nation.
Hence why being set up as an ISAC instead of something different then, right?
Absolutely. And we are a nonprofit, so we're not government funded. We didn't come from the government side. We are a completely nonprofit organization, and really more of a grassroots effort.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think I've heard the analogy kind of to CR-ISAC, although it's not a one for one by any means, but I think it might help people understand the mission a little bit, is that it's similar to like essentially like a Red Cross version, but for the cyber workforce, the
Yeah.
civilian cyber workforce, right?
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's when you're doing a kind of a model comparison, I always say, American Red Cross, we're not on the deploying side. We're not deploying as a civilian reserve. We are basically the reserve that has these folks who have been vetted, who have the skill sets. We know what kind of skill sets. We know, where they could be of value if they choose to be. Because remember, it is volunteer based. And then at the end of the day, the partners we strategically align with, they're going to be the ones who are going to provide the relevant training based on the shortages we have. They're going to be the ones. So it's a community that we're building within the reserve of folks who have OT background, the skill sets, maybe, even people who have gone back to school and want to do a career change and want certain type of training under their belt. That's a big element of our platform, is to have vets as part of our reserve in order for them to engage as a reserve when there is a time and when they will be needed. So ideally, aside from American Red Cross, we're not a deploying platform. We have, other examples could be the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps. There's so many out there, programs that have civilian expertise and in mission critical for national resilience needs.
Yeah, and even though you're not a deploying organization, the idea is that you can still get boots on ground or fingers on keyboards to support local infrastructure, right? If it is something related to critical infrastructure, say a water dam or electricity grid or something like that, or even small businesses, if it's something broader like a solar winds where it takes out a lot of different kinds of organizations, you can surge support to those organizations or facilities with the talent, this volunteer talent who can maybe supplement some of the efforts. Is that a fair, accurate statement?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you'll enjoy this, Jeff. At the end of the day, CR-ISAC, what makes us really unique is that it's the human-centric approach um, in a sector that has a gap that requires certain skill sets. And it's extremely important from a humanitarian angle to take very seriously, and to be prepared for. We can have all the best practices and input. It's about our execution. And so CR-ISAC isn't around to hold a bunch of meetings and bring stakeholders and try to figure things out, but then not execute. We're here to actually, I mean, if you recall, we were at the 2-hour meeting, and I brought that up in the meeting. Everyone in this room received the agenda beforehand. They know what we're discussing. And at the end of the agenda, if you recall, it said what are the items we're going to deploy here in Tampa? What are we going to execute on? And every organization at the table knew that coming in. And I started calling people out, which I don't know if that's the right approach, but hey, 'tis the season. So, ideally, people raised their hands, and you did obviously as well on behalf of skillrex, and that's what it's about. It's about the human centric approach here. It's about, you know, proving that national defense isn't just about networks and meeting, and it's about actually the people side of it. So we're all mission driven and aligned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that you're focused on Tampa, and actually, I'm grateful, Sasha, that you're about to chime in because I was going to pass it over to you. Also, being a resident of Tampa, and the importance and significance of this Tampa area. So, add what you wanted to add, but also if you could elaborate more on that too, that would be cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just, to Katrina's points, like I just love that this is really about like what real collaboration looks like. It's not just signing like
Yeah.
an MOU. It's really just actually connecting people, intelligence, and readiness across these different sectors. And I think, there's a lot of talk about public and private partnership. And I think there's obviously different ways that you can do that. But I think this model really makes it tangible, with the volunteers from the industry contributing their expertise to defend alongside, government partners and people local and, from across the state and others as well. It's really just building a true culture of service and shared responsibility. And I think that's really where like this sense of resilience and service really does begin. And it's really exciting to start it kind of here in Tampa. Last month, I got to attend the Cyber Bay conference, and I think that that was one of the whole concepts is that there are just in the Tampa Bay area, there's so many innovators, education, military and government partners as well, and really trying to champion. And this was Arnold Bellini's kind of like vision of making it Cyber Bay because you have all of these different contributors, on different levels from the education to the actual practitioners and the government that is here too. And they can really just come together and really serve as this community. And it's just really exciting, me being here in Tampa, that all this stuff is happening right here kind of in our backyard. And I think there's just so much opportunity to continue that collaboration, that sense of community and partnering here, and then being able to take that across the state of Florida and to really serve as a blueprint of how other states can replicate this after, we kind of figure out the best practices by starting, locally here. It's just really exciting and awesome.
Thank you for great points you made there. And the one thing I always like is we're discussing, how exciting it is and what we could do. I like to also provide some examples around it. So to your point, Sasha, I think absolutely we want to make it a success in Tampa and then take it across the nation. You got to do it right. You got to do it right from the beginning, and and not waste people's time and get people to see that their effort and time is making a difference. They are contributing to the mission, however way they can, because again, it's a volunteer base. And we're creating that pipeline. Ideally, the idea here is that the reserve continues to grow, information sharing gets more robust amongst all these different entities, private and public, and we become a trusted, credible reserve for this type of skill set that is needed.
Yeah.
And when I hate to say this, when there's chaos happening, everybody's got to engage however way they can. And I've found that in the cybersecurity industry and people with this type of skill set, they're in this space because they truly want to make a difference. They could be in so many other sectors. So they're already in it for all the right reasons. And I think that's the human centric element that I think is so organic and fluid with CR-ISAC's mission, and why I personally myself actually decided to be part of this organization, and now chair it and be able to build the right roadmap to be effective. I mean, my passion started because I went in my doctorate research, as you guys might be aware, it was all about safeguarding critical infrastructure from nation state adversarial attacks. And I can tell you firsthand, a lot of folks, especially I think there's a shortage in women in these. I mean, it's growing, it's getting better. And I know, Sasha, you and I can talk about this because we're both involved in various types of organizations. But it's a little bit of an intimidating space for folks that maybe are not aware of it or understand it and how they can help. Maybe they want to help. Maybe they don't know how to engage. Maybe they don't know how to be part of the reserve. So what I always say is my story within itself is a little unique. I don't have that traditional, engineering or cybersecurity background. Yes, I was on a board of a hospital, which is part of the critical infrastructure sector, and I firsthand as a board member experienced a ransomware attack to our hospital, and I saw how crippling something like that really truly is. So my passion grew because we served the most vulnerable, underserved community in our region. They already had scarcities. There, between minorities and people from other countries, and I mean, over 50% of the community that we served or our constituents were really people who needed it, who had a need. So when there is a cyber security attack, and by the way, hospitals, it's not if, it's when and how many times. Because just because you've had a breach once doesn't mean they're an easy target. Well, in the critical infrastructure space, people die. Literally, people die if there's a breach that is unfortunately successful. So that element of it is the humanitarian side of the work we're doing. So my passion grew from that, and I got into the space, and I decided to take on a sector OT and really understand it. And the more I dug into it, I found that aside from the OT sector having its own unique challenges and complexities, again, legacy systems obviously have their own challenges. It's not IT, it's OT. The part that also stood out to me was the lack and scarcity in human skill set, and not really knowing if that skill set and how many. So this goes right back to skillrex, right?
Yeah.
To the work you guys are doing from the analytics angle, from data at the end of the day is king. And I always say that. And so I think that element of it ties so well from a private public partnership between us being a nonprofit, you guys being a company of a partnership that we can add value to each other's missions. So these are elements of why I'm passionate about the work we're doing to make a difference. And it affects all of our lives, at the end of the day. So I know I'm going on and on about all the excitement around it, but I'll give you guys a chance to chime in.
No, it's great. Actually, I've got a couple things on my mind right now I wanted to react to. And one was around the critical infrastructure conversation. Bryson Bort is involved in CR-ISAC and supporting the mission as well as ICS Village. And if I recall correctly, please correct me before he smacks me in the head when I be down there tomorrow.
You'll be on a panel with him tomorrow. So
I know. I'll get penalized, I'm sure.
Right.
But they did some study, right, when they were talking about critical infrastructure especially around water, that if water supply gets impacted where it cannot be distributed, we're talking about a day to 2 to 3 days max where shit hits the fan, really, really hits the fan and people die. Is that an accurate statement? And also kind of why there's so much focus right now with CR-ISAC on finding talent to support the critical infrastructure mission set, and obviously, people with OT and ICS SCADA skills as being part of that.
Yeah. So, well said. And, I think the piece you're talking about is within the critical infrastructure definition. I mean, they're under the CISA, there's 16 critical infrastructure. Our real focus are the ones that are essential to human survival. And as Major Macias always says, water, logistics play a big part of that, obviously, and hospitals, energy, power. So the elements within critical infrastructure that really hone in on human survival in our country. I'll give you an example. If you guys recall, but a little over a year ago, close to 2 years ago now, when there was a congressional hearing with former head of CISA, Jen Easterly, and the director of FBI at the time, where they were presenting to Congress about Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon was, Chinese government sponsored breach where we didn't know for something around 5+ years that they've been sitting in our critical infrastructure. They could have done something. They could have, when I say something, I'm talking about they could have caused a lot of, issues in our country and our nation. They were living off the land, gathering data. And this was where I think, Will, you might be excited about the fact that we're talking about PQC and living off the land and being able to decrypt later. So there's a cybersecurity element of it from that angle, but then there's the other side of it. We're in geopolitical times, right? Where we all know that, for example, China is in this tech Cold War, trying to be the first for the quantum computing side of it as far as the technological advancements. And then we're also in the fourth industrial revolution of these times, where there's a geopolitical landscape that we need to be very present to. And wars are not fought the way they were fought before. I mean, yes, those things still happen, and we still have the strongest defense in this country as of now, and in the foreseeable future, hopefully. But as far as the cyber side of it, we are as good as our weakest link. So if our critical infrastructure is not being addressed, we have shortages there. How strong are we at the end of the day? Now, with the Volt Typhoon breach, yes, nothing happened. They were, aside from them gathering information and being ready to deploy when needed. And then we come to find out that the reason that even was the case was due to the fact that the whole situation with Taiwan. Well, we know that if they've been wanting to take Taiwan, and that's an issue economically for the US and the rest of the world, with semiconductor chips and so forth. So that's a whole different conversation. So if we know all of this, when we know this is not just a national, this is a geopolitical and also an economic play, well, what else do we need to do in order to take charge and be part of, organizations like ours when there's, shortage of these skill sets to be able to step in? I mean, that's again what Major Macias learned from his experience of talking to the Ukrainians, to deploy and be ready to deploy. Granted, we don't deploy, but having the skill set ready to go if they choose to, when it's needed, not after the fact.
Yeah, great points. And Will, your name got invoked. I know you're resting your voice, but it is a really great radio voice. So did you want to kind of respond? Or
I was actually going to ask about kind of, because we talk about skill set shortages and things of that sort. And so part of me was like, and it might be going into like how the sausage gets made, but I was kind of going to ask a little bit about, how are you guys at least currently engaging in like finding those challenge shortages or those skill set kind of gaps and things. And then how does that kind of play into the broader sort of, I guess, ecosystem that CR-ISAC has?
No, good questions.
Where we come in too. That's we're part of that solution. So,
well, yeah. So I'm like, oh, so how's it going?
Well, plant a seed with me so that I can share how we're doing it. So I get what he's dropping. Don't worry. No, but good question. I mean, before our collaboration, we were building a vetted reserve through an application through our website, and we were promoting. We were at DEF CON, we were at ICS Village. We have volunteers who've stepped up. People are passionate. So we are building awareness. I've sat on panels. I was at Critical Effect DC over, I think it was back in May or June, and I presented on Civilian Reserve one day of being chair on the board, and I was already thrown in the mix. So I think we're all just rolling up our sleeves and making sure that awareness is an element of it. The other part of it is people are drawing. People, they want to learn and know, and they want to know how they can help, right? So they are getting involved. They are submitting applications. We want to scale that. And with my background, I come from the entrepreneurial side of this world, and I truly believe that grassroots is a big element of this. People will step up to the plate when they can for a cause that they align with. So in that sense of it, we've been building it from a more grassroots angle. Obviously, we have LinkedIn. Please, by all means, do follow us on LinkedIn. Check our website out. We have applications that you can submit a brief application that just kind of vets. For information sharing purposes, obviously, we want to make sure it's a protected circle. Again, we're not a government entity, we're a nonprofit. But for the skillrex side of it, when Jeff and I got introduced, I immediately saw a great collaboration partnership here, because my doctorate was in, even though I focus on, it was in engineering on cybersecurity, my doctorate is actually data analytics. I know the value of what data can do and how powerful and impacting data is. And to have a partner that can provide the right type of data to us and engage with us, especially early on, because we're still a fairly new organization, right? And we are looking at building this effectively here in Florida. Well, if we're able to capture all the data around the existing skill sets, the existing training, the existing certification, all of those various things, and be able to, in a sense, have access to it state by state as we develop and grow, right? Region by region. Well, guess what? That data is going to be very instrumental when it's needed, with alignment with state partnerships, with alignment with those who are going to need it at that point. So, between that and information sharing amongst us, if something were to happen in one state and there's a shortage and another state doesn't know about it. I mean, this is a story I hear all the time, actually, across
Sure.
the nation, is that there was a breach that happened at one utility entity, and another one didn't know, and then they got breached the same way. So if we're not sharing that information amongst all of us, and then we're doing a disservice to our country and our nation's security posture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's kind of really I got really excited when we had that conversation, because there's a vetting aspect to it that Katrina already mentioned, and it's important to know, that we're not allowing for any foreign spies into the network, right? I mean, because that happens. Like,
Yeah.
employers have hired inadvertently, foreign spies. So we want to make sure that we're in a protected group of vetted people. I think that's less so on SkillRex to do that, but there are some processes that can be, put in place, that are in place to do that. Where we kind of come in is the data analytics side of the people, right? Really taking and understanding where all these volunteers going to be best suited to support. Like when there's a hurricane anywhere, right? What does the governor of the state say? It's like, you don't want just volunteers rushing to the scene. You're going to muddy up the waters and make it harder for actual responders to get in there and do their job. So you got to be coordinated and organized, and you just don't want random people supporting, even though it's out of a good intention from their heart, right? They want to support and they want to help. So where we come in is we can really understand the reserve force, the people who make it up. Where are they located? What are their skill sets? Are they OT people? If so, like, how skilled are they? Are they like senior experts? Are they kind of, mid-level? Do they have certain certifications that kind of give a little bit more bona fides? Do they know certain products, that can be support a certain mission or an organization that might be using certain security products or tooling? And understanding kind of where their current skills are, because again, at the end of the day, it's an ecosystem, right? We want to know if we have people in the reserve who are in a geographic location that hold a public trust or a security clearance of some sort, who have the skill set, well, they can be surged easier than kind of pulling someone halfway across the nation who might not be best fit for that support mission. So we're going to be doing a lot of the data analytics on just the skill side, of course, but also some of those other, pivots, data pivots of kind of what you want to do when you're looking for who's best, able to support that mission for whatever crises might be in front of them. So
Yeah. And Jeff, one thing I want to add to that, actually, that I think is really interesting perspective to have, and I didn't know this until I got into my research over a year ago, was that when we talk about critical infrastructure and OT, remember, a lot of the data is proprietary. So we don't even know, we don't even have access. And if there is access, like in open source platforms where you can kind of gather data, a lot of the data is either flawed, it's a garbage in, garbage out, or it's outdated, or there's a lot of issues around it. So how effective and efficient, or how valuable is the result when, the input might not be as great? And for national security reasons, a lot of this data is proprietary to protect our country, right? Again, it's a national security issue. So that being said, to have data that we gather is profound for many reasons.
Sure.
One being obviously the readiness, the other being, like you mentioned, making sure, that data and the regionally, we know where it sits and so forth. And then the other one is even the ability to use that data to find where the shortages are, and basically have information to better prepare us as a nation to say, hey, there's a major shortage specifically in these areas, not here. What kind of training exists? And hence, ICS Village is building the training. We're partnering with them. And hence, other partners that have been talking to us about real world simulation. Because in the OT world, you really have to have hands-on real experience and simulation training to know what to do. So that element of it is also different in a sense from a lot of the IT side. So, and there are many people maybe who on the IT side who would like to start gaining OT expertise and experience too. So being able to understand where the gaps are, and also what kind of training, what kind of hands-on training we can really connect them to,
Mhm.
so that we can create that vetted volunteer platform that's going to be a lot more robust than any other ones that we know of. And that's what makes us so valuable and unique in my perspective.
Yeah.
I like that, at least, because we talk a lot about like data, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. And part of me truly believes, especially in the OT space. So what for me, whenever I'm kind of looking into like, I'm going to call it like cyber literature, but like I'm always like just searching for kind of new stuff, especially about frameworks, language, taxonomy, stuff like that. And I find that we get so wrapped up in, I guess, the kind of more emerging sectors, right? We're talking like quantum, we're talking AI, we're talking all these different things, that we kind of leave a lot of these more critical sort of systems, and kind of talking about them, establishing a very robust dialogue kind of in the, I wouldn't say in the dust, but they get forgotten sometimes, right? And not only that, but I look to a lot of different frameworks, and they will go and say, oh, OT, like operational technology and like critical infrastructure, are like one of the very tiny things in this broader span. So like when we talk about data, and we talk about, collecting and vetting and skill sets and things like that, that's at least personally where I'm kind of going, like, that's some interesting kind of stuff there. And I don't want to get too much into the minutia of this, but I find having those, how to gauge those specific in this one particular industry is just super fascinating.
It's also why it's really important for CR-ISAC to be partnering with folks like ICS Village, right? Because it's not just about, and we know this from all the work that we do at SkillRex. That's never a once and done thing. It's never a static image of what the workforce is or where people are.
Yeah.
This field, this profession is constantly evolving with all these specialty areas that kind of sit under the umbrella of cybersecurity, OT being one of them, right? But it's important for us to understand as an organization, if we're talking about the CR-ISAC perspective, to understand who is skilled when they come in and raise their hand to be a volunteer, but how they are evolving in that field too, right? So if they are going through trainings from ICS Village or simulations, being able to extrapolate how they're performing on that and then putting that back into their record, is where we kind of, it's part of our bread and butter. We want to see where their skills gain over time, because where they volunteer 3 years ago, they're probably not the same level, I hope not, than they are when they have some training and opportunity to get more experience and hands-on keyboard activities.
I love that, because it reminds me of Art of War, and people know me know that I love strategy, and I feel like SkillRex to me is a tool that I get to use to play the Art of War. Isn't that great? I feel like I just came up with a new avenue for SkillRex here, but also at the same time, mission alignment, right?
Yeah.
So that being said, I also think, based on Jeff, what you just shared, how many of you, actually, here's a fun little trivia question. How many of you know about the Red Queen effect? Have you heard of the Red Queen effect here?
No.
I've heard of it in passing.
Okay. So Red Queen effect, if you guys remember,
I got to stop you real quick though. I don't want to, if this is this week I learned.
No, it's not.
So this is just
it's not. Great. But how about this? I give you a 2 for this week.
I love it.
Okay. This is an organic one. The one I'm going to save is going to be about quantum computing, and that one's for Will. So that one I'll dedicate to Will. But the Red Queen effect is something that I think I always talk about it in my presentations, and I always bring it up because it's fun. If you remember Alice in Wonderland, looking into
that's what I was going to say. I was like, is that where it's from? Okay.
That's where it comes from. Okay. And the Red Queen, hence. And if you recall Alice running, and the cards were flying underneath her, and she was basically stagnant, running in spot and not able to get ahead, and the Queen was catching up with her. So it's derived from that. And actually, I didn't know this, but it's actually a business term, the Red Queen theory too, because in the business world, it's keeping up with your competition, where in cybersecurity, it's your adversaries. So if you are not keeping up with the times and the evolving, you're falling behind, and your adversaries, you're not going to keep up with your adversaries, right? So in this situation, I think with what Jeff just shared, yeah, you having your finger on the pulse, the data side of it, knowing what you need to do in order to keep up with the times with technological advancements. People are afraid of AI. There's all this noise around us between AI and post-quantum and quantum computing and cybersecurity. And this is my world. I lived in this every day, as you guys know. And I'm always trying to build awareness around what really the important pieces of it and what we can actually do about it. And so I feel like the Civilian Reserve, CR-ISAC, actually gives that type of a place, that type of a community, and that type of a platform for us to be able to do something about it. And again, Red Queen effect, to be able to keep up with our adversaries when and if not if that time comes.
Sure.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and what was it? Because I'm partially like, again, I kind of knew a little bit about it. I thought it was very much like there was something to do with this slippery slope and this momentum of like obviously like keeping up, but then it's like how do you get ahead, right? And
Mhm.
again, because again, I'm always talking about I love data, and I think data is the best thing ever. Which sometimes I'm everything in moderation. It might not be the best thing ever, but when we talk about especially the data that we acquire and we kind of go through, it's constantly me talking with say like Jeff in our stand-up meetings. I don't know, our team syncs, right? And stuff like that,
Yeah.
where I could go, hey, we could use this data and pivot it, right?
Mhm.
And we can actually, having that as a pivot point, because again, we're talking about not only are we using, stuff to engage, see what the shortages are and properly vet people and things like that, but then also how do we nurture the people that we do bring into the fold? Because, and again, I love this. There was this, I'm forgetting it. It was a study from back in 2020, but they were positing, premiums on particular experience, especially in the cyber security industry. So when we have like volunteer work and we have actual like you're participating in real world experience, that's going to be the greatest, I guess you could say buff to, your skill score, right? Whatever kind of, metric we're using. And so I think that's part of like, again, having this sort of nexus that will kind of be like, hey, go here or like go here or something like that, I think is just amazing, right? And so not only are we keeping up, but then we're also getting ahead, right? Where it's very much we're not just trying to tread water, but now we're getting that forward momentum because now we could just pivot off of this data and be more kind of forward looking and things like that. We're already forward looking, but we could be even more so, right? So I love it.
I think Will, you like the Red Queen effect theory. I feel like you're gonna go and dig into it more and start applying it
Oh,
because
yeah, he's gonna buy some books, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have a notebook like right on my desk. So whenever like I hear things in these like conversations, I'm just like I'm jotting it down. It looks like mad scientist scribble and stuff like that. But
Method of your madness. I call that the method of the madness, right? So
Yeah.
oh yeah,
yeah. No,
Oh,
I think that's, also I'm a storyteller, so I love being able to, these conversations can end up being very mundane. And you hear it over and over, you become immune. You hear cybersecurity, everybody thinks what they think about it.
Mhm.
But when you tell a story, a relatable one, when you tell a story that somebody can actually, whether it's on a Zoom or whether they can feel it, it affects their community, it affects their home, it affects their families, it affects their children, it affects the future. I think then you really have their attention.
Yeah.
And so I think these are the times that we need to really use those authentic conversations and be able to build awareness around like the conversation we're having today. I was very much excited. I shared it with all of you that I was looking forward to this because I think the more of these conversations and dialogues we have, the more people can start really not assuming, because assumptions are not always accurate, not running to the fear side of it, because again, media, propaganda, there's a lot of fear elements. Like AI, one of the things I was really frustrated about is it's been not, and by all means, there's so many sides to AI as well as, we know that when there's a opportunity for people to take, people who want to take advantage of things, they're going to figure out a way. They're going to find the voice. They're going to find opportunities. This is not new to any of us. This is how the world unfortunately works. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that we should fear things we don't really understand. Let's try understanding. And I think we're at the times where both empathy as well as understanding, especially with technological advancements, is going to help our nation prosper collectively. And so
Yeah.
I feel like being part of, yes, we're just a new nonprofit civilian reserve, but being part of it and being part of it genuinely to make a difference is what I'm here to do. I don't have time to waste. None of us do.
Yeah.
And so being aligned with people like that in this mix, that's why the partnerships amongst a lot of us has worked so well. I want to take this to the State Guard, for example. They were at our stakeholder meeting in Tampa. They are holding this conference. We are doing a teaming agreement with them. We're going to be announcing it in our upcoming presidential reception, which is coming up this Friday. Very excited about that because our collaboration amongst our organizations is going to be I feel like pretty profound for the Tampa region, which I think, Sasha, you're going to appreciate hearing for various reasons. They are an established organization that are going to be a great resource to us and vice versa to them. And SkillRex gets to be a direct contributor to all of that as we continue to grow and really start becoming, in my opinion, the piloted collaboration platform for states to look at, to adopt. And remember, every state's different. Every state's critical infrastructure platforms and landscapes and challenges are different. But at the end of the day, we're all here to defend our nation collectively. So I think this is why I'm excited about taking on Tampa, and it's been moving pretty quickly. If you guys haven't noticed, we're executing on some big things. And my call to action for people who are listening here is get engaged, because we do need more strategic aligned partners. We do need private sector to step up. And I like to hone in on the private sector because we think critical infrastructure and cybersecurity, we always think public sector, we always think government. Private sector is a very important partner here aside from the fact that we're a nonprofit and we need all the sponsors and partners. And we are going to be holding a conference in 26, which I'll be happily able to share more once we have more information about it. But we need to get the private sector partners that want to be part of this, because guess what? If they have, skilled people who are going to be part of our reserve and they're going to be needed, well, we want to know that those employers and those strategic partners already know about us.
Yeah.
They already want that. They are already aligned with the mission, and they know that their people are going to be getting involved, so that it's more of a fluid, organic, alignment when the time is here. So it goes beyond just the checks, even though the checks are needed and please, by all means. But we do have so many ways of engaging with us, either as a civilian who wants to be part of the community, as a company, and also organizations and strategic alignments like the State Guard and, like you mentioned, ICS Village and others. So there is an opportunity for all, is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So the call to action here for those who want to kind of support CR-ISAC, need funding, right? I mean, it's just your nonprofit needs supporters, and that comes in the form of sponsorships. Can it come in the form of donations?
Yeah.
Is that true? Okay. You need partnerships from a private sector that beyond just the funding. So if there's an organization out there that can support in the same way from a training component, what else? What else do you need from the private sector?
I mean, like, look at our relationships with SkillRex, for example. You guys are bringing in a tremendous amount of value. We're newly aligned, and I feel like a lot of great things are going to come from this. And again, I'm a data nerd as well, so I immediately, honed in on the value that the data will establish for us as we continue to grow and develop. And being in the early stages of this and knowing that we're building that data and continuing, hopefully, to do so, that type of strategic alignment is very valuable, not just to us, but as we grow our partnership across the state, it's going to continue to add value across the state, right? And ideally across the nation as we start going outside of Florida. So I think if there is a value to be had in these conversations and people are hearing it and their companies can bring that in one way or another, then we're ready to have a dialogue. I can be found on LinkedIn. Feel free to ping me. Dr. Katrina Rosseini, you can find my LinkedIn. I'm accessible that way. We're focused on Florida right now. So we want to get in front of the governor's office folks. We want to get in front of the key elected. I mean, we're working towards a lot of that, but any folks as far as, collaboration, network, connection, those help as well. We want to get alignments with the sectors on the utility side, energy side, hospitals, existing ones in Tampa and the greater Florida region, so that we have those in place so that once we finish this pilot here in Florida, we can take the same pilot to other states and say, this is what Florida has done. This is what we've been able to achieve. This is where we're at. And other states can start looking at that as an opportunity to do it.
Well, thank you so much for putting a nice fine point on that. And there's your call to action, folks. Get involved if you can get involved and help our nation become more resilient. I'd love to pivot to our next section, a final section of the show, which is This Week I Learned. And we know Katrina has one ready to go for post-quantum, so that's exciting. But Sasha, can I give you the floor first? And then we'll go Sasha, Will, me, and then give Katrina the last word on it.
Yeah. I think, it's not necessarily something I learned this week, but something I think I've been reflecting on a little bit more, very poignant of our conversation today. But just other things recently, is just the power of volunteering and specifically that shared purpose when it comes to cybersecurity. I think that, we are always talking about like, the technical skills and what's needed and focusing on tools or even data and defense and all the things. And of course, all of that's important. But I think, having that deeper sense of, motivation behind it all is the service. And I think obviously we know a lot of people are busy. You have work, you have your personal life, families, things like that. But really being able to use that time and energy through volunteering, through causes like CR-ISAC, mentoring, or being a member of a professional organization, supporting local initiatives. And I think, just really giving back and using the strengths and expertise and knowledge that you do have. And I think just for me personally, October was a very busy month and a lot of different events and conferences and, organizational stuff that I'm a part of, like WESIS Florida and other community organizations like Black Girls Hack. So that, first top of mind is mentorship and taking advantage of things like that those organizations offer. But even just like the conferences that I attended and getting involved with conferences and, serving on the planning committees and really trying to think about, okay, we have to go to these different conferences or we get to go to them for professional development and learning and networking opportunities. Why not take a little bit more back of the power of what content is being, sent out and what conversations are we having, and not just making it conversations, but making sure that there is call to action and actually, sharing best practices and sharing, these different efforts that are happening and spreading the awareness. And I think that's a really good way to do that. And just being able to get volunteering and be involved with those events and conferences and things like that to share your voice and to help, determine the content, who gets represented, how our community continues to evolve. So I think that's just kind of just what's been on the top of my mind, and obviously just, related to this effort as well. So not something necessarily I learned, but just been reflecting on it. And I think I'm gonna, keep challenging myself to keep getting involved and volunteering my time to get involved in these different things that really, I'm passionate about, and I hope to make a difference in this field.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Will, what you got for us?
So I kind of fell into a rabbit hole. I'm gonna so because basically for me, and one of the things, like, I will spend a lot of time even outside of work, which like I know Jeff, Sasha, you guys are like, dude, like take the weekend, man, and stuff, like, come on. But I'm like up like late at night reading literature in my wizard den and stuff. And I was basically going and, trying to find, I guess it's like basically how we could do, heuristic or like behavioral detection and kind of have this more probabilistic sort of approach to cyber skill sets. So and part of me was kind of going like, oh, it shouldn't just be like analysts can do X thing, right? It should be analyst, and I think I even wrote it down somewhere. It was like the probability of analysts detecting or finding or doing something under time, noise, like load, right? Like workload, stuff like that, right? And basically going, because again, for me, I'm like, okay, how granular can I get until like I start to just go mad with like, all of the cosmic, whatever. But so I got into this really interesting study, and it came out this past summer from the Rochester Institute of Technology. But it was basically talking about security and cognitive impacts of explainable AI in security operations centers and using those. and basically kind of going and kind of breaking down the psychology of it. And so it's not necessarily anything that's particularly what we're doing here. It really went from a pivot of like, okay, how are we measuring behavior and skill sets to like on the fly, how are these explainable AIs, right? XAI, not to be confused with the XAI. I think that's a thing. Yeah. Anyways, um, and so they were talking about there's things like the trust versus explainability curve, right? They're saying how can we properly utilize explainable AI in SOC teams and things so that they're not a complete liability or they completely give away, like the reins, right? We don't want a low level SOC analyst to just be completely like, oh, this is what that means and this is what that means, right? Because again, it will basically supply you with, hey, this is the alert, this is what the alert means, right? And hopefully it's somewhat context driven and it has some kind of meta layer that it's looking at all of these different through lines. But it's that kind of deal, right? It's like how much noise or how much explanation do we put in before this thing gets completely useless, right? And so it was kind of that odd sort of deal that I was very interested in. And so I may like I keep finding these really cool things and I need to find a place to publish them. And I kind of want to do them on LinkedIn, but I'm like, I'm so shy about LinkedIn. I'm like, oh my gosh. But
Don't be shy.
oh
I
my gosh.
swear,
Yeah.
if you start writing it and even in short form and posting it, people will interact with you. Because if you have this question, imagine others do too. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think
Oh,
that,
no.
yeah, your thinking is on par, and what you put out there, it could even be a question to start off with. Like,
Oh,
what do
yeah.
you guys think about this? You don't necessarily need to write something. You can just get others to comment, right? And actually, I was chuckling right now because I was thinking about how much you might appreciate the research I did. So I developed Secure Grid, which was
Mhm.
you mentioned context aware. Well, it's funny because I feel like an element of AI as far as the benefits and optimization, we're not there yet with it, right? But where we are with it from optimization, well, I mean, that piece of it is pretty instrumental, and we're all trying to gauge and get our arms around it. A lot of CEOs of companies are still struggling on how to best effectively use AI. So I think with what you're saying, I, looked at it as all right, where it fit with my research was the context aware. So I developed an intelligently formulated context aware um, algebraic formula that eventually will become an algo, but that's another story. But ideally, the entire thing was really sufficed around the fact that we have these metrics that are being used, whether IT, OT, but they're not really taking the full context into consideration. And
Mhm.
that aligns very well, again, plugging in skillrex here indirectly with context, with data. When the data is not there and it's only as good as what you put in, then those metrics are not going to suffice at the level that you're speaking about right now, which is to
Mhm.
say, context is very instrumental in data. So I think that fits this conversation so fluidly, and I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna just say that, like, imagine I said all of that, and that was like my this week I learned as well. That's my twofer. Is I'm gonna parrot that whole thing
Twofer.
just because I'm like, yep, there we go. And
Yep.
especially what was it? Yeah, I think it is that context awareness that I find
Mhm.
very interesting because um again, AIs really like to hallucinate. Like they really like to hallucinate. Um, and so for me, it's always a whole thing of like, how do we appropriately gauge context? Because like I'm gonna be honest, like once you get into text encoding and stuff, it actually gets pretty simple. It's just now we have this black box and we have to constantly probe it in order for it to like truly understand. And even if it's explaining stuff back to us and we're like, this makes sense, we don't know if it truly understands. And so when it talks about the integration of that in, say, a real time, like again, it's being plugged into, seams and endpoint detection software and stuff like that. It's like, okay, like how are we going about this? And so it explains a lot more of the psychology on the actual analyst side. And a lot of the stuff they're like, well, we have to have better model explainability and we have to have better this and that. Those are the kind of things where I'm like, okay, like those are the real tough questions that I'm like, so what was it? I love it though. I'll probably, uh, yeah.
That's a part two. There's going to be a part two on this for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. So we'll
um,
go in, but Sorry.
I'll chime in here so we can kind of get it wrapped up. But
Wait, well, I had my second one. You were going to
oh
give
no,
me a
I'm
chance to.
going to go and then you're going to go. You're going to get the
Oh,
last
I
word.
thought you were wrapping up a moment. No, I
No, 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 no.
specific.
I'm trying to wrap Will up.
Okay.
He'll go on for hours on this. So we'll have a
Mo-
part 2. You guys can
Yeah.
have a data nerd convo and a kumbaya.
Half of our team syncs are just me like going in. So apologies.
Oh no,
No,
you
don't.
should.
I
First I
understand.
have it. First I have it.
No, we love it. We love the passion. So this week I learned Washington Post put out a column a couple of days ago. It was their Department of Data that did this, and they were answering a question around what jobs no longer exist. So it was a really interesting article, and in 1860, 30% of Americans held what job? Anybody wanted to guess what job 30% of Americans had in the 1860s?
Telegraph operator.
Farmers.
Oh,
Farmers.
I was like,
30% of farmers, Americans were farmers. And today, that number is about to less than 0.3%. And
Wow.
our population has increased, right? So it's not that our demand for food is less. In fact, it's more. But what has changed in the farming industry is the technological involvement. The efficiency of it has completely changed that particular profession. In the same way that the Industrial Revolution has changed jobs like cobblers and shoemakers, blacksmiths, right? They don't really exist anymore because it got industrialized, and then those factories did those jobs. Less people had to do them by themselves. We had factories produce them at large, and then a lot of factories went overseas. So those jobs over time just completely diminished. But farming is by far the most diminished job if we look at the history of the United States. Which leads us to what economists call structural transformation. And I think kind of threading the needle here with the conversation around AI, I think this is kind of where we're at right now with AI. It's a possible period of structural transformation where we're moving from low productivity in the same way that agriculture was low productivity in comparison to some of the advents in technology that let them do it faster. We have the same kind of thing happening with the AI space. So I'm really interested in kind of what is this transformation going to result in, right? Where we have an evolution of, people in professional services right now utilizing a new tool or method to enhance what they're doing, right? We have a change where AI has allowed us to have data availability at mass scale. But now we need to really understand what the validity of the data is and those algorithms and everything else. So I think we're in this awkward transition of this revolution space where we're seeing dips in employment and people being let go as we move through this structural transformation period. But what's on the other end? What does the next wave of employment look like, or professions look like as we come out of it? So I thought that was a really interesting read. If you want to get a chance to read that article, it talks about other jobs, and it also talks about how enslaved communities also played a part in the data. So it's really interesting to read.
Yeah, if you could drop it in chat or put it on LinkedIn at some point, I think that'd be a really good read for all of us. There's also this big fear around, jobs being lost, and then stops there about AI is bad, right? But to your point, the fourth industrial revolution, it's got a lot of benefits, like with the farmers, for example, as population growth has happened. What I actually, to tag team on that, you might be interested. There was an article, I forgot which one, I'll have to dig into it. I read a while ago about from an economic standpoint, countries that do not adopt and or implement and or really bring AI into the mix, their GDP is going to get hit the most. So going forward from a projections standpoint, think about that. Those that rely on other economies and countries, they're going to be left behind. That goes into entire different, that falls into how does the class systems get affected? How do those, it's a haves and haves not conversation from a socioeconomic standpoint too, that ultimately, even those who have and are on the forefronts of technology and embrace it, there's going to be risks for the ones that don't, because how does the world change with that? So that's a whole different conversation that I'm not going to crack open right now. But the one that I thought that you guys would appreciate is I actually attended the congressional consortium. It was put together by the tech committee. in DC, and I went there. I attended it a couple months back, and the national security element on quantum and the economics. I mean, at the end of the day, it's now become a major priority for our country coming from the administration. And then seeing, it's a fight to the finish. It's a fight to who's there first, and the confusion around quantum computing and like when that's going to happen. I always focus, especially if you read my articles, really on the symbiotic relationship between AI and quantum computing. And then when it comes to cybersecurity, it's the PQC, right? Because we do need to transition our encryptions from classical to post. And that's a whole different can of worms, which we don't have a full segment, maybe at a future time. Where I found that I could bring a very interesting tidbit to the table from a storytelling standpoint is my recent conference that I went to last week in DC for UDACON. UDACON 2025 was eye-opening because we did have a lot of conversations on technological advancements, including quantum computing and PQC specifically. And one of the takeaways I had, which I didn't know, which I thought was profound from a workforce development and a future trajectory, was that in China, in their physics class today, tomorrow, yesterday, I don't know what the date was, but every student in a physics class is going to have a quantum sensor on their table. Why? Because they're positioning the future workforce in the space because they want to be leading the space. They want to beat the United States in the space. What is the United States doing as far as awareness, education, accessibility, young people learning and being able to? The GDP of our economy in the future is likely going to be tied to these technological advancements, especially on the AI, quantum, and so forth conversations we're having. So that's a very interesting thing to think about. How are we building our future workforce, not just in the current times, but for the future? And I'll leave it with that.
That's a good one to leave us with. Heavy thoughts. That is a wrap for episode 5 of the Cyber Talent Matrix. A huge thank you to you, Dr. Katrina Rosseini, and the entire team at the Civilian Reserve Information Sharing and Analysis Center for their leadership, partnership, and strengthening our nation's cyber resilience, and for reminding us that readiness starts with people. The challenges ahead demand both strategy and service and the courage to bridge data, talent, and mission into one connected defense. Join us next time as we continue our journey to uncover the data, strategies, and stories shaping the future of cyber talent. And be sure to connect with us, SkillRex, and CR-ISAC on LinkedIn, and make sure to follow or subscribe to our show on YouTube, Spotify, and or Apple Podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, the future of cyber resilience is being built one team at a time.